I'm 90 years old now, and most mornings I sit by the window longer than I need to, just watching the light change. There isn't much urgency left in my days. What presses on me instead is the weight of what I didn't do and why. I don't say this to be dramatic. At my age, drama feels childish. This is just the truth that has settled in now, that there's nowhere left to run from it. I don't say this to be dramatic. At my age, drama feels childish. This is just the truth that has settled in now, that there's nowhere left to run from it. Fear didn't ruin my life all at once. It didn't shout or shove. It whispered, and because it whispered, I listened. I understand that now, but I didn't then. These days, my world is smaller. Most of the people who knew me when I was young are gone. Some died early. Some lived long lives and still left before me. The phone rings less often. Names slip from memory, then come back hours later when there's no one to tell. I don't mind the quiet. What I mind is how much of my life I spent waiting for it to be safe to live. When you're young, fear feels responsible. It feels like wisdom. It dresses itself up as caution, as maturity, as doing the sensible thing. I was good at being sensible. In my 20s, I told myself I'd take risks later. I had time. Everyone said that. There was always later. I worked a steady job. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't meaningful either, but it paid the bills. I told myself that was enough for now. Meaning could come after stability. I stayed quiet in meetings, even when I had something to say. I didn't want to look foolish. I didn't want to be wrong. When I fell in love, I held back parts of myself. I didn't want to scare anyone away. I didn't want to need too much. I thought I was being careful. What I was really doing was practicing disappearance. In my 30s, the days sped up. Responsibilities multiplied. Fear blended in so well with routine that I stopped seeing it as fear at all. I stayed in places that made me smaller because leaving felt irresponsible. I tolerated conversations that drained me because conflict felt dangerous. I postponed joy because it seemed indulgent. There was always a reason. There was always a future version of myself who would handle it. I remember specific moments now. Small ones. The kind you don't mark at the time. A friend inviting me to move across the country and start something uncertain. I laughed it off and said I wasn't that kind of person. A woman I loved asking me why I never talked about what I wanted. I said I didn't know. That wasn't true. I knew. I was just afraid to say it out loud. An evening where I could have stayed longer, listened more, asked better questions. Instead, I went home because I was tired and assumed there would be another chance. There usually was, until there wasn't. Fear is patient. It doesn't need to stop you outright. It just needs to slow you down. By the time I was in my 40s, the shape of my life had hardened. Not because I chose it deliberately, but because I never chose against it. I told myself this was what adulthood looked like. I told myself everyone felt this quiet dissatisfaction. I told myself wanting more was ungrateful. So I swallowed things. Words, longings, questions. I became reliable. People trusted me to show up, to be steady, to not rock the boat. They didn't know how much effort it took to keep myself contained. I wasn't miserable. That's the part people misunderstand. I was comfortable. And comfort can be a very effective cage. The cost didn't announce itself. It accumulated. I missed birthdays because work felt more important. I skipped trips because money felt safer in the bank. I delayed difficult conversations because I didn't want to upset anyone. Each choice made sense on its own. That's how fear gets away with it. Relationships didn't explode. They thinned. People stopped telling me things because I didn't ask. They stopped inviting me because I often said no. They assumed I was content. In some ways, I was. In other ways, I was quietly vanishing from my own life. The turning point didn't come with thunder. It came with a phone call. Someone I loved deeply died sooner than expected. No long illness. No drawn-out goodbye. Just gone. I stood in a room full of people sharing stories, laughing softly through tears, and I realized how little of myself I had ever fully offered. I had known this person for decades, and yet there were things I never said. Moments I avoided, truths I postponed. I kept thinking, I'll tell them next time. I'll be braver later. Later had closed its door. Grief has a way of sharpening things. Not immediately. At first, it's just noise and exhaustion. But months later, when the world keeps moving and you're left with the quiet again, the clarity arrives. I saw my life laid out not as a tragedy, but as a series of almosts. Almost honest, almost present, almost brave. That's when fear finally showed its face. It wasn't the fear of dying. It was the fear of having lived half a life while telling myself it was enough. I tried to change after that. I did. But change is different when time is no longer generous. Some doors don't reopen. Some people don't come back. Some versions of yourself are tied to an age you've already passed. I spoke more honestly, but fewer people were left to hear it. I took more risks, but the stakes were lower because the horizon was shorter. I don't say that to discourage anyone. I say it because it's real. There are things that cannot be fixed once enough time has passed. I will never know who I might have been if I had trusted my voice earlier. I will never know what certain relationships could have become if I had shown up fully. I will never get back the years I spent waiting to feel ready. That's not bitterness. That's acceptance. At 90, you don't fantasize about alternate lives the way you might at 50. You simply acknowledge what is. Some mornings, the regret feels sharp. Other days, it's dull but constant, like an ache you've learned to live with. I am grateful, too. I've known love. I've had moments of joy. I've laughed more than once in this long life. But gratitude and sorrow can exist in the same breath. If you're listening to this and you're younger, I won't tell you what to do. I don't believe in instructions anymore. I'll just tell you what I wish I had understood. Fear doesn't always look like panic. Often, it looks like practicality, like patience, like being the good, reasonable one. It tells you to wait. It tells you not to rock things. It tells you there will be time. Time is generous until it isn't. The things that matter most rarely announce themselves as urgent. They whisper, too. A conversation you feel drawn to, but avoid. A truth you keep editing. A life you sense on the edge of your own, waiting for you to step toward it. You don't have to be reckless. You don't have to burn everything down. But presence is not dangerous, even though it feels that way. Honesty is not the same as selfishness. Choosing yourself occasionally does not mean abandoning others. I thought it did. I was wrong. At this stage of my life, I am not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of how quietly I let fear negotiate my days. If this resonates with you, sit with it gently. You don't need to act immediately. Just notice where fear is speaking softly and being mistaken for reason. That awareness alone would have changed my life. As for me, my time is short now. I spend it simply. I watch the light. I remember faces. I speak when something matters, even if my voice shakes. I can't reclaim what's gone. I can only tell the truth about it. That's what I'm doing here. When this ends, I'll go back to my chair by the window. The day will move on without me, as it always has, and I'll sit with what remains, grateful for the clarity, even though it came late.